Hey everyone, welcome back to the ByteTalk podcast, a podcast where Johnny Lundy and Zeno Rocha interview the most productive people in tech. We discuss tooling, setups, open source startups, big tech, and everything else. Today we have a very special guest, Netto Farah. He's a principal software engineer at Segment, which was recently acquired by Twilio. He's focused on building tooling that empowers product engineers to build features faster and more reliably. Netto is a believer in solving complex organizational problems with design instead of processes. Welcome, Netto.
Thank you. That's a good intro. Sounds about right.
Netto, we're super excited to have you here, man. You are our first interview, which is amazing. We're super honored to have you here.
That's amazing.
And I'm curious, like, I see your background looks a little bit different than usual. Where are you right now?
I'm in Playa del Carmen in Mexico at the moment.
Wow, that's
It's not a bad place.
How are you liking it?
Sounds beautiful.
It's amazing. I love it down here. It's my second time in Mexico. It's just incredible to be back here. It's my fiance and I are doing a little retreat right now. We're actually currently separated due to COVID. We can't be in the same country at the same time due to immigration restrictions. So we're doing a retreat in Mexico so we can spend time together.
I know that you love like traveling around and all that. You lived in San Francisco, right? And you decided to move to Austin. That's where your base is.
Yeah.
So
Austin
tell me, like,
home right now.
Yeah, why did you make that move? I know lots of people are doing that, so I'm curious to hear what do you think about that whole migration to Austin.
Yeah, of course. This is something I've been considering for the longest time. I think it's like maybe for the past 5 years. It's I've been wanting to pull the trigger. Of course, when you're in there's the whole complicating factor, I guess, in my case has always been immigration status. Depending on the sort of visa that you are at the time, you're not allowed to move around. Like to freely, you actually have to. I was on the H-1B work visa for the longest time, and during that time, there were certain restrictions that I had to apply to. That was basically it kind of restricted the places that I could live depending on the location of my employer. So moving to Austin has been a long-term project, and once my immigration situation allowed for that, I decided to take the plunge and like see how it was like. One of the reasons why I decided to move there was that one is like community. I've been wanting to get to know more people, get more involved in other communities. I felt like I explored San Francisco and the Bay Area pretty well for like the first 10 years of my living in the US. So I wanted to expand my community, as well as I wanted to get into the climbing scene a little bit more. You guys know you've been climbing, you've gone climbing with me. You know how much I love it.
We embarrassed ourselves in front of you, yes.
And so Austin has like a pretty amazing rock climbing community. It has one of the largest rock climbing gyms in North America. So that was also like a really exciting like factor to help like push for that decision.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like we have a mutual friend who used to live in Chicago, and he moved to SoCal. And one of the reasons was because he was a big fan of jiu-jitsu, and there's a big jiu-jitsu community down here. So it's really interesting how like your hobbies play like a super important role in where do you live, right? That's super.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that goes a lot into like your decision making. I think don't get me wrong. I think San Francisco and Silicon Valley is just an incredible place for you to start your career. And I don't think I would have done it any differently. I think it was fundamental for where I am right now. And, the experiences that I've had, the people that I've met, the companies that I worked at, and, the communities that I was part of. I think it's just at this stage of my career, I'm starting to prioritize some other things a little bit better. Yeah, and that is mostly what drove me to another place.
What was that like doing the move? You moved in 2020, last year?
Yeah. So this was also kind of a funny situation because I was actually on a business trip to Vancouver at the time. So my fiance and I, we were actually planning to go on a trip to Italy in order to help expedite her citizenship application in Italy. It turned out that while we were out, we were doing like a pit stop in Vancouver for a business trip, and that's when the lockdown started. So all the borders shut down during
Crazy.
the beginning of our trips, and we were in Vancouver at the time. So we're basically stranded in Canada for a few months without being able to like get a flight anywhere. So of all places, that was an incredible place to be to be stranded.
Yeah, it's a good spot to be stuck.
It
right?
was a fantastic place to be. It was spring, so Vancouver is beautiful. During spring, we had a fantastic time. And then when it was time to return to the US, I didn't have a home at the time because I had just returned my apartment in San Francisco. So I was like, well, why not take a chance now? And it seemed like the timing was right. So I actually, I took a flight from Vancouver to directly to Austin, and just kind of on my own started like, checking out the city and exploring.
What do you miss the most about Silicon Valley?
I think it's a bit early to say. It's a bit hard to because of the pandemic having changed like social interaction so much. But I'd say, moving as a 32-year-old, it feels much harder to make friends now in my 30s than it was in my early 20s when I moved to San Francisco. So I'd say what I miss the most right now is just having a large network of friends and really just knowing where to go to start making those friends. But I think San Francisco was instrumental, I think, in just shaping my career and exposing me to just this wide range of problems and opportunities. I think like just being able to job hop pretty easily. Not that I did it a ton. I've only had 3 jobs in SF in 10 years, which believe it or not, it's actually just a few. You could actually have like 5 or 6 jobs in 10 years in Silicon Valley. So, but it was just knowing that the opportunities were there and the community was there, and that I could attend a different meetup every week if I wanted to. I could just hit someone up on Twitter and just go grab coffee with them the next day or the next week or lunch or anything like that. That to me, it was also how we met, right? We met at a conference in San Francisco, and it was like through some Slack chat, and there's just a lot going on. I don't know how things are going to be going forward after like life returns to normal. I bet there's like with so much talent moving to so many different cities, I suspect that you're going to be able to replicate sort of the Silicon Valley energy in a lot of places, and hopefully only the good things. I know it's like a contentious topic, but yeah, I hope only the great things about San Francisco get replicated somewhere else.
I love that. I can definitely relate to your move. I also moved from SoCal, not SF, but up to Oregon, and it's just a tough time to move. You can't settle in the same way because you're not meeting people just in your normal life.
Yeah.
Like you're not going out as much. People, even neighbors in my apartment complex, some are like comfortable just interacting in the hallways, some aren't, and that's totally understandable.
Yeah.
But it just makes there's just more hurdles to finding community. So yeah, hopefully it can get back to normal soon and we can start building that up again.
Yeah, I'm hopeful though. Just the last year that I've spent in Austin has been really fantastic. I think even with the climbing community that I mentioned before, I've already made friends at the climbing gym, which is something I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone at the climbing gym in SF other than like a friend who's hanging out with me. I've found that, at least in Texas so far, people have been very welcoming and warm, more so than I would have expected. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And one of the things that I know from you is that you worked for IFT back when you were in SF, right? For those who don't know, it's that company, like if this, then that. And this, like, I love that tool so much. I'm still a big fan. I love the design, everything about it. It felt so cool. And I'm wondering, like, how do you see this transition in the market where Zapier is taking such a big cut of this productivity market? And just like, I just wanted to get your thoughts about what do you think about all this, and how was working at that place and seeing that transition from code to no code. In a way, IFT is a no code tool.
I guess,
right?
like, yeah, I guess you could put it that way, like being the sort of like the inventors of no code, even though like that wasn't even like a term back then. I mean, of course, there were like other tools before that. You could say that like maybe Dreamweaver was, or front page was kind of like low code, right? You could argue that like, yeah, in the 90s, they were already doing this. But yeah, like IFT was one of the coolest places I've ever worked at. I haven't been really in touch with folks after like, it's been like 4, almost 5 years that I left. So I haven't been very in touch with them, but like, it was incredible to be at a company that it feels to me like, looking back, like it was way ahead of its time. You know, just leading the charge in building a way that was very approachable for non-engineers to start automating parts of their lives. To me, that was like, that's what drew it to, like, that was really the draw to IFT. When a recruiter first reached out, and I was like, yes, absolutely, I would love to talk to you, because this is a product that I'm a big fan of. The design is just beautiful. It makes programming so approachable to so many people. I think that Zapier, I guess like they started at about the same time. I would say maybe like just a couple of years maybe after IFT, if I recall correctly. And I think just they chose a really good audience. I think what was really hard looking back at IFT was just catering to so many use cases, and just having to spread so much in like a wide range of integrations, and going from catering all the way from you know, smart home IoT, all the way to social media, to storage, to all of those things. So I remember having to constantly have to context switch between all of these different personas. And it was even, at least for the time that I was there, we were still developing who these personas were and where we wanted to focus. We were so focused on having a great user experience, having a great developer experience for folks building on the platform. But I just think it's the nature of building a B2C product that makes it really, really hard for you to, even after you stand out. It's a known product. It has millions of users. It runs millions, if not billions, of automations and jobs every day. But I don't think there was really a clear persona that they were catering to just as clearly as there was for Zapier. And I think that's like credit where credit is due. I think Zapier is an incredible business, and they figured out who their audience was, who they were building it for, how to build it very easily. And I'm a massive fan of the company. I think they were like pioneers in remote work, which I think like I guess like they were already doing like globally distributed remote engineering teams like years ago. They are already like pioneering a lot of the really great UX and developer experience that you get for building integrations. Building integrations is really hard. And I think Zapier has nailed really the platform side of things. They've also nailed, like I said, who their audience is. And it's just very clear. You start using Zapier, it's like, it's very clear what it's built for, what you should do with it. And I think they just got a really big advantage by focusing on the sort of a B2B or enterprise, or even B2C, but like tailored at businesses, where it didn't have to worry as much as building an amazing iOS app or an Android app. Had to worry about all of that stuff. Building, I think IFT built some pretty incredible award-winning apps. We won so many awards for great design, but we were solving for everybody. And we're solving it on mobile, we're solving it on web, and on the platform side of things. It was just really hard to scale at that level. But I hear they're doing really great. I hear they have this sort of a more like B2B take now. They're doing a lot of integrations and even like white labeling, I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it must be really hard to like manage a source code that has so many different integrations and different touch points. And it's interesting because like knowing you, I can see like how you're always deep in that space of integrations, right? And man, how was like managing a code base like this?
Yeah, it's been, I think it's like maybe the past 8 years of my career, I've been working on this sort of integrations in the API space. And I think it's just now that as an industry, we're finally getting a much better handle of what it actually means to integrate with APIs. I think there's been, like with everything, I think we were in a stage a few years ago where it was all novel and really exciting. And maybe as engineers, we tend to be a little pessimistic. I think folks who are building products were a little too optimistic on what it meant to integrating with APIs. But like what you learned as an engineer, as like you start building all of these things, it's like the more you integrate, the more broken your system can be. And it's really hard to separate what is a failure on your system and like a failure that's coming from a partner. So even from a marketing and communications and support standpoint, it's really hard for companies like IFT or Segment to actually, detect like where a failure is coming from and like getting that sort of visibility and passing that visibility on to their customers to explain it's like, hey, I'm doing my job, but maybe this little component of my system is not behaving so well. But from a customer's perspective, they don't care. It doesn't matter where it's broken. It just matters. It's like it has to work when it has to work. And there's like so many players that are coming into the space now, and I feel like there's a much more mature ecosystem that are like much better tools these days. And I think we're starting to learn as an industry that if you are to offer no code or low code or any sort of integration to your customers, you also need to offer the entire ecosystem of tools that come with software development. I can't just go in and empower someone with more ways to integrate or to extend their applications or their lives without giving them the tools to verify that they actually work. So I'm seeing that now the industry seems to be moving in a space where we now have CI, we have like better testing tools, we have better debugging tools, better logs, even for no code or low code. So it just it gives you now the true power of writing code, even if the interface is different. And I think like our industry is starting to understand that you need really, really good tooling around no and low code.
Wow. It's such an interesting space. We were just talking a little bit in the last episode about dependencies. And it just made me think of that because the more you integrate, like you have the benefits of synchronizing data and workflows and everything, but then you add yet another dependency, one more link in the chain that could break and destroy the whole chain basically,
Yeah.
And even at, you feel free to go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention that, going along those lines is that if you're not, anytime that you add a new integration point, you're at a risk of your reliability being at the lowest common denominator. Because now you're probably just as reliable as the least reliable component of your system, of course, depending on how you design it, right? And if you're going, our impulse is to actually design everything to just like integrate at the same levels of abstraction. So it's very easy to go down that path where you end up having your dependencies being the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. And like you said, the customer doesn't care. So you introduce like a poor dependency and then it just looks bad for you in the end. And you're having a hard time supporting and it turns into, and that's probably very similar to the segment space too. I mean, it's an integrator. It's kind of it's a different functionality in the end, but it's the same where you're needing to work with so many different sources and APIs. So what has that been like, even comparing those two, workspaces and experiences?
Yeah, I'd say that there's a lot of significant overlap, I'd say, between If This Then That, Zapier, Segment, and Tray, or many of these tools that are integrating data at different levels. Maintenance becomes a really, really big challenge in all of these cases, where you're constantly looking for APIs that are breaking, or looking for ways to make your system more reliable to breakage in some places. I'd say that Segment is very mature in that space. I've seen like constant investment from the very beginning in making our infrastructure very reliable. And what we've been seeing, there's a lot of pull actually into visibility. So Segment customers also want to understand where their data travels. So I've been seeing a lot of investment, not just in Segment, but in other companies too, where there's investing in observability and tracing, really understanding, actually having a view of seeing where every touch point of a packet, like everywhere that it's going, which API it's hitting, for how long it's spending in some stage of a pipeline. And some Segment customers have been using a tool that we built that gives them visibility to see exactly how their data is traveling. And yeah, I think whatever company wants to integrate with, wants to build a data catalog or an API catalog, needs to consider all of these things before they build any sort of integration. How they're going to get visibility, logs, testing, even like stress testing and observability and metrics and everything, to understand the health of each integration, how they work in isolation and how they work in tandem.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I feel like our impulse as developers is that we want to be the hero, where we want to implement those solutions. We want to encapsulate all the logic possible. We want to handle all the errors, and we want to make that in a transparent way, in a way that customers don't need to understand everything that is going behind the scenes, right? But at the same time, like I was reading an article this morning, it was called "Stop Being the Hero." And the author, Linda Zhang, she was saying how we shouldn't be trying to be like Luke Skywalker. We don't need to be the heroes on the story. We need to be more like Yoda. And that's how I feel like it's a good way to approach those problems, because instead of us solving all the problems, we need to actually give better tools for the customers to be the heroes, right? I feel like that really integrates with that idea of observability and empowering them.
Yeah, I was just speaking to a friend of mine who's starting in this space too, and it's one of the companies that I'm investing on, and they're building, and they're in the integration space as well. They're building integration tools. It's slightly different take, but what I've seen is that, okay, regardless of who's building these integrations, it's all going to come. It ends up being the same thing. You end up having to write this glue code that integrates everything, and there's really not a way to escape from that so far. There might be, we can get into that in a little bit, but you might end up you're going to have to write this glue code anyway. I think the company that's going to get the real competitive advantage is the one that can write this glue code at scale. And it could be that you can reach that scale by hiring 1,000 engineers who can write that glue code hundreds of times a day, or you can build incredible tooling that makes it really easy and really obvious to do it. And so certain things that I've seen companies experiment with, something that I think Segment has nailed, is having a really strong contract and have type safety in every part of the contract. So if I can move the validation of an API to the compiler, as opposed to actually having it happen in real time in production when someone's using my API, I'm going to catch a lot of bugs really early. If I have a good tool that provides me with a ton of unit tests out of the box that I can run my integration against, that would also going to allow for me to catch bugs a lot easier. And if I can have like a super full-fledged HTTP client that does all the right things, like logging and handles timeouts and handles authentication and all of that stuff right off the bat, then I'm also going to have a huge competitive advantage. So I think for anyone who wants to get in that space, the developer experience and tooling is one of the big differentiators. It's the thing that will allow for you to build 1,000 integrations versus building 100 versus building 25.
Yeah, it's a very similar case when we're talking about like growing a SaaS product or something like this, where if you're increasing the number of customers, you don't want to increase in the same linear way the number of support engineers, right? You want to do in such a way where you're growing customers while maintaining the same number or growing at a much lower rate. And I feel like that's the same for this kind of use case. You don't want to be hiring like, okay, to add 10 new integrations, we need to add 5 developers, right? No, that's not the case, because then if I want 100, now I need 50 developers. So that's a very interesting way to think about, okay, it's not only about getting things done. In this case, it's getting things done in a scalable way.
Yeah, I think until we get some really good AI that can figure out those contracts for us, I think it's like, at least the way that I see it, it's either fantastic tooling or you figure out a way to have AI generate all of that glue code for you. I think if someone figures that out, then that is the thing that scales your catalog to 10,000 integrations. If you can have the code be like self-written and like self-healing in some way. I don't know how far in the future that would be, but I think if someone can figure that out, then that's a massive business opportunity as well.
What have you seen? I mean, because so much of IFTTT and Segment is dependent on these other softwares that are being integrated. If you don't have integration with any other platforms, then there's no point using them, right? In terms of adding more to the catalog, have you seen that mostly be a dependency internally of releasing new tools to integrate, or is it really on the external side of trying to convince the external platforms to create APIs or to integrate specifically to Segment or that kind of thing?
I think it can actually go both ways. I've seen both companies do both things. I've seen other companies do both things, where you have like 2 tracks where you have your own developer platform, which is a huge effort. Like you have to spend a lot of time building an actual development platform with tooling, with testing tools, with like reviews and all of the things that you would expect from an app store, right? So you're essentially building an app store, and that is the thing that unblocks a lot of your development, because it puts the onus on your partners who want to integrate. But at the same time, there are going to be the big logos on your catalog are the ones that you're going to have to build yourself. So say you want to go in the enterprise space. Salesforce is just table stakes. You don't go in the enterprise space without a Salesforce integration. And it's probably not going to be Salesforce building it for you, because there's like thousands of companies integrating with Salesforce. And the onus is on them to figure that out. Of course, like maybe you reach some scale where you're already talking to someone in like business development or partnerships. But it's the same thing with like Facebook or like Facebook ads or something like any of these big integrations that everybody wants to integrate with, right? You're probably going to have to roll them yourself, but those are also great testing grounds for you to like figure out what your API should look like, what your infrastructure and developer experience should look like. So once you get these big logos and you build this like the more significant integration, then you can generalize that case to any other partner.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really curious, because I know you were one of the first employees on Segment, right? Do you remember like the number, like what number employee you were in Segment?
I think I think I was probably in the first 200, not like that early. I mean, fairly early, but it's like maybe the first 150 to 200. But yeah, that was already an ongoing, like when I joined, we were already doing like maybe the second or third rewrite of the integrations platform. And I think for like any business of this scale and like working in this space, you're probably going to have to keep innovating and integrating newer tools and like things that just make you more, that give you some edge in like being able to build integrations faster. So one of the things that we've been investing a lot recently, it's type safety through TypeScript. So that alone is a huge productivity gain because you're bringing some of the verification much earlier, and building a solid testing strategy and a solid release plan. So how do you release like new changes to integrations when you have very business critical like customers that are using your integrations, right? So Segment doesn't go in and like make a change to a Salesforce or Facebook integration and it just rolls it out. Of course, that it needs to go through like an extensive level of QA. It needs to go in through to like a very safe and incremental rollout strategy. And it's figuring out these processes and the tools that go along with it that actually give you the reliability that your customers expect from you and gives you that sort of competitive advantage for you to just keep not just growing your catalog, but also hardening it, like making your platform even more reliable over time.
And how do you see like this transition? Because you were able to see like this fairly small company, like with a couple of integrations grow more and more and more. And now like last year, it got acquired by Twilio. And how is like leaving that acquisition? I know that many people also like have to experience that sort of thing where they're working for some company and then some other one takes over. Like how it's been and how is life now working for Twilio too?
Yeah, I love working at startups. That's one of the things that I love about startups is that I actually really embrace change. And one of the fun things about working at a startup is like you're working at a different company every month. Maybe after a while, every 3 months, then maybe every 6 months. It's like it's always sort of a different company. So I saw that transition so many times at Segment, and it was always so exciting to see, especially with a company being so open and so transparent. Like I remember going to all hands meetings and seeing ARR 1 month and then seeing it double the next month and then seeing it double again in a couple of months and then see it double one more time or like grow exponentially. And at the same time, you're seeing new hires every week and there's new people every week and then there's a new department and then there's a new team. It's like if there's one thing that's certain in a startup that's successful and growing fast is that there's always going to be new reorgs. So I guess like the more successful a company is, it's like if you can't remember the team that you're at like 2 months ago, then it's probably a good thing. It's definitely not for everyone. Some folks like a lot more stability in that regard. But yeah, we've got to a point where I remember when we used to name certain code bases after the team names. And then at some point we just realized it just doesn't make sense because it's just going to change again in like 3 months. Let's just find a name that's like, naming things is hard. We're like, let's just find a name that's like not dependent on a team name because we know it's going to change again. So like if there's a tag or anything that includes a team name, it's like, just don't bother. Do it based on the project or like the product that you're building. So it's been a pretty incredible ride. Like I joined and maybe like 20 engineers. And I think last time I checked, we were like 120. But
wow,
the go-to-market team, at Segment has always been world-class and like growing super, super fast. It was incredible to see some of my friends like have amazing trajectories on the go-to-market side, as well as, I mean, of course, also in the engineering side, seeing so many folks transition into becoming product managers or becoming engineers from like completely different careers has also been extremely exciting. And of course, with the acquisition now, of course, a lot of things change. It's a lot to adapt to. It's been really good so far. I guess like the only weird thing that I guess a lot of people experience is that when you get acquired, you're now part of a company that maybe you didn't know as well as the one you joined. Because every time I join a company, I do a lot of research. I speak to a lot of people. I think through like the mission and the product that they're building. But with an acquisition is like one night you're part of company A, the next day you receive the news that you're now part of company B. So it could definitely be a shock, because it's not something that you had on your mind. I don't know. Whenever I want to switch jobs, I think about it for like 6 months, and then I take my time to look at like the company's vision and mission. And with an acquisition, you just don't get that choice, right? You're now part of company B, and you're taking the entire package. Luckily, it has been a really great company, like a really great acquirer. But yeah, it could be a little jarring for some people, for sure.
What has been your path over the last, you said 10 years in the US. I don't know if you had more years of work before that, but has it been just like linear within engineering? Have you moved around to any departments? Have you done different types of roles?
I've done a little bit of everything. I'm a little, I don't want to say restless, but it's I like experimenting with different things. I like trying different things. I tend to make, every time I make a decision, I try to make like the most informed decision I can. And in order for me to do that, I like to experiment with a lot of things. So I've done a little bit of everything, from like academic research back when I used to live in Brazil, to then doing consulting work, which is what brought me into the US. And what I really liked about consulting work was just this ability of being exposed to a variety of problems. But even though it scratched that itch of like working on a lot of different things, I was always missing sort of like a mission, or like something that I would sign up to. I guess it's like similarly to an acquisition with I guess with consulting, is that you don't really pick the project that you're going to work on, or the mission that you're signing up for. So I was always, even though I really enjoyed consulting, I wanted to work at a place where I was really excited about the business, and where I felt like an owner as well. So I felt like I had a stake of what was going on. So that's what drew me to startups. And so when I moved to the US, I joined this company called 8tracks, which was one of the best jobs I've ever had. If folks are not familiar, it's a online radio website. It's been revived. So 8tracks, number 8track.com. It's a website where you can find playlists based on a genre or a mood or like an activity. It was an incredibly fun job. It was like a 5-people startup when I joined. It was I got to do a little bit of everything. I did iOS development, I did Android development, web front end, web back end, a little bit of DevOps. It was really some of the most exciting 3 years of my career, just doing all of that, like all sorts of different work, and also being exposed to a brand new culture and like place to live. I didn't know what Silicon Valley or San Francisco was. I didn't even know what the Golden Gate was until I moved to San Francisco. It's kind of it's funny in retrospect that I didn't know much. I didn't know much. I just knew that I really liked the product, and I decided to give it a go. I sent them an email and say, hey, I really love this project, like this product, and I would love to collaborate in any way that I can. And that landed me a job.
Really?
Yeah, that landed me a job interview that I really liked, and things just kind of worked, and went from there. Then working at IFT was also an incredible journey. It was I owe so much to the team and to Lyndon, the founder of IFT, because it was where I learned so much about user experience and front end and web design and web development in general. Like, it's where I got exposed to some really problems at some really massive scale, and the integration scale. 8tracks was also massive scale. 8tracks, I think, had 20 million monthly active users. So it was
wow.
Yeah, some pretty significant scalability issues on the read side of things. But what IFT was a lot at the integration level, and it was also that really strong attention to it's like sweating the details of everything in the UI and the user experience, with it being so obsessed with like providing the best design and UX for the problem that we're solving, for a really hard problem that we were solving. It just gave me a really great eye for design. It helped me. I am not a good designer, but at least I can judge good design after like the experience with it. And learning UX and the developer experience, and really honing in on those skills, and like learning how to build world-class, award-winning websites and apps was just really incredible. And then moving into Segment was where I think I probably collected some 20 years of experience in just 4. It was just an incredible ride. I did a little bit of everything at Segment. Joining so early, I had the opportunity of actually running a couple of teams. So I was an engineering manager for a couple of years at Segment. I ran maybe 4 or 5 different teams. Had the experience to do some hiring, which was my favorite part of the job as a manager. I was able to hire some really incredible and like very, very talented folks that have had just amazing trajectories at Segment, folks who've been even more successful than I have been at Segment. I consider myself so lucky to like have found them and convinced them to join and take on a mission with me. So that was a really amazing experience. But eventually I realized that I was getting a little too detached from like day-to-day work. I'm still very passionate about building. I just really love building. I love the flexibility that comes with writing code. I think it's software engineering is really life-changing for a lot of people. For me, it definitely was a life-changing profession. It still is a life-changing profession. And it's like the stability and mobility and flexibility and freedom that it gives me, I think is like nothing can really beat it. So I started like missing that sort of flexibility and, having my calendar for myself and having that
that's super difficult nowadays. That's huge.
And like owning my schedule again and owning my own time and being able to create. I was just craving that again. So I switched back to being an IC about 2 years ago. And that's when I started focusing most of my time on tooling. So I spent a lot of time helping build tools, helping build it was part of becoming a principal engineer. It was just no longer having localized impact, was figuring out ways to have an impact on my entire organization. And I found that like 2 ways, there are 2 ways that are very effective in doing that. One is helping define architecture and processes. But with that, I can only do one at a time. I can only help rewrite one or re-architect one system at a time, and provide guidance one person at a time. And one way that I found to like really multiply my impact was building tools. So I would spend, I still do spend a lot of time watching and observing and seeing how people are building how people are building products, how they're building their systems. And I try and generalize a lot of the things that I learned from those designs and from watching other engineers, and then try and codify that in a way that it becomes part of their workflow, and it just helps them do the right thing by default. So I helped build some tools to help manage database migrations in the safest way possible that makes it really easy for you to do the right thing and prevents you from making mistakes and allow for you to recover from mistakes really easily. I spent a lot of time optimizing build times. That's something that I'm very passionate about. I love sub 5 minute CI. I think that's the only correct type of CI. I think if your CI takes more than 5 minutes, you're doing something wrong. You just need to go back to the drawing board. I'm a strong believer in continuous delivery. So I worked on building some tools that make it really easy to release new software, to release it safely. And among other things, most recently I started working on Analytics.js, which is one of the main products at Segment that is really the front door for web analytics. It's an amazing product. It's been working really well for the past few years, but it was due a rewrite, modernizing some of the tools and like optimizing it for performance of the team working on it and our customers. So I watched and observed the team and the architecture and the process for a few weeks. I saw like the things that could use some optimizations, and then I presented like a re-architecture of what I thought we could do and like some of the tools that we could build to make engineers more productive. And we've actually just launched in beta a few weeks ago, and we had some customers sign up, and they really love it.
That's awesome. And have you seen like any like impact on that launch? Like what changed from like a previous version to this new one?
So yeah, one of the main changes that we made, so it really doubles down on modern JavaScript. Analytics.js, of course, we still need to serve like some pretty legacy browsers. So we still support IE 10, I think, IE 10 and 11. And
I thought you were gonna say IE 6, so that's good.
No, like not that far. Not that far. You would actually be surprised. Some of the engineers on my team have not used IE at all, which makes me feel really old.
Wow.
But we still support some versions of IE. But it really doubles down on using modern JavaScript and like really leveraging the event loop, leveraging async loading, leveraging promises a little bit better than the old versions of Analytics.js did. Kind of like ballpark, you could expect a much better Lighthouse score. This has been one of the things that we've been optimizing a lot for. It's reducing bundle size. That was like one of the main goals of the project, reducing bundle size, only loading the features that you're using at runtime, which has been really awesome. And we've optimized a lot for analytics to not get in the way of your website. So we built it in such a way that every task happens asynchronously. If you're like tracking an event, it goes on a queue. The queue like dispatches it using the event loop, and it leverages batching as much as it can. It does things using modern like fetch API with keep alive that allows for you to send events even after the browser tab is closed, and a lot of really interesting and like minor optimizations that like it does like tree shaking properly, so you get like the smallest possible bundle size. And this was actually one of the most fun parts of building this project. It's like even if you think about it, you can even have an impact on carbon footprint of analytics. If you think of like a segment having thousands of customers and being loaded on thousands of websites for millions of users every single day, in a way, as an engineer working on Analytics.js, I have a responsibility to the planet of like even shaving off a few kilobytes of JavaScript actually means reducing carbon emissions, which is it's a pretty incredible mission to have, like to help reduce carbon emission in like web analytics, right? So we've leveraged a lot of really interesting things. Like I'm a big fan of Webpack, and I love all the tools that it gives you to like optimize your build. So one of the things that we do is we actually have bundles for each, not for every feature, but for every significant feature. And we know which segment customers use which features. So we made it so because everything is done based on promises, the moment that an analytics client reaches into a feature that's not commonly used, for example, in the case of Analytics.js, it could be middleware. So if you decide to use an analytics middleware, we're actually going to go in and like fetch the bundle for that analytics middleware and inject it into the browser, teach the browser how to deal with middleware, and then actually send the function call over. And then that allowed for us to actually slice Analytics.js into several different features, and then just have the core of it be like as small as I think like 18 kilobytes. So then everything else is like pulled on demand as you need it. So it just makes for that first interaction to be really, really fast. And it's like an incredibly interesting project to work on.
Yeah, it's crazy because you never think that like as a developer, you're gonna like by refactoring a piece of code, you might like save the planet a little bit. Do you have like, it's so insane, right? Do you have any numbers around that you can share? If you can't share, that's fine, but I would love to hear more about it.
It's still a little early. We actually have a team who's working on actually doing the fine-grained calculation of the impact. But what I can say is that our caching has improved dramatically, because now we actually cache every single feature and just deliver this one core bit of analytics that knows which cached or non-cached version of a feature to load. So on that alone, we have a much better cache ratio. So I think our caching has improved by like 80 or 90%. Bundle size has improved by at least 40%. So you can kind of do the math there, like whatever carbon emissions, like it's probably now at least like 30 or 40% lower. We're working on a blog post where we'll share all the impact that this is going to have. But yeah, it's been really incredible, and like it put me in a very different mindset. So I think so critically about third-party dependencies now. So to the point where actually Analytics.js only has, I think, like 2 or 3 third-party dependencies that are like handpicked and like gone through bundle phobia, where I actually see the impact. I spend so much time looking at Webpack maps. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that analyze source code plugin for Webpack, where you can actually see little maps of like chunks of code. I spend so much time on that now, trying to understand the impact of the code that I write. And I actually got into the habit of vendoring third-party code now. So I would actually find a library with a feature that I need. I would go in and grab the source code, and I would start shaving it off to remove all the functionality that I don't need. So there's a lot of JavaScript third-party libraries that are going to validate if input is a string or a number or a float or a Boolean. It's like, I don't care about that. Like, I know that I'm always going to be passing this string, and I'm very conscious of the bundle size now. So I'm going to vendorize that code. I'm just going to copy it over to my code base. I'm going to delete all the validation code, everything that's not string related. And I'm going to get the smallest size possible for my thing. And then whenever I can't, for example, one of the things that we were looking at was like polyfilling for IE. So we did something that feels a little hackish, but it's actually made our bundle sizes so much smaller. That was like, okay, we were going to have to polyfill promises and a bunch of stuff in order for Analytics 2.0 to work with IE. And we just can't take that 6 kilobyte hit for like all the polyfills that are required for IE. In our case, was about 6 kilobytes. So that for us was like 25% of the bundle size. It's like, I just can't afford to do that. So one of the things that we did, so actually we spun up like an IE VM, and like we kept loading the site and seeing what broke. And then we found all the things that broke. And the way that we solved it was to actually put a large try catch in the entry point of analytics. We do a try catch and we check if it ever fails to go into the catch. You see if it's like a syntax error, or you see if it's like promise is not defined or anything like that. And then if that happens, then you dynamically load a polyfill. You fetch it from like a remote script somewhere else and restart the entire flow. So it takes a lot of creativity for you to like figure out some of these browser quirks and like work around some of these APIs. But what we learned was like, by making everything promise based, you can always delegate like loading code from like a remote server when you don't have a functionality available. And that was like one of the biggest learnings.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because like I feel like right now as an IC, as an individual contributor, you're going very deep on very specific problems, right? Whereas before, as an engineering manager, I imagine you would handle more like people problems, right? You're dealing with promotions, hiring, and all those challenges. Like going back to that difference between them, like for folks who are trying to figure out, maybe they are not even developers, right? I know that many developers struggle with that because they are following their career and they think that, okay, now to advance, I need to just like be a manager, right? And that's not the case. Designers might feel the same. Oh, I'm really good technically, but I have to take the next step. I need to be a manager. how do you feel about that? Do you feel like everybody needs to be a manager at one point in their career, or no, they can just be an individual contributor and that's fine?
I think, well, it's such a hard question to ask, because like I haven't figured out that answer yet. I think in my case specifically, being a manager was amazing. Like, I've learned so much. I had a lot of fun. Of course, my fair share of stress. I've had to let people go. That was one of the hardest things that I've had to do in my career. I've let a couple of people go. It was incredibly challenging, but it was the right thing to do for the person and for the team. So that is something I absolutely do not miss about being a manager. I also do not miss the many meetings that I had to go to, and the many no's that I had to say in order to protect my team and to protect my own time. That was, I think it's like, I mean, the same way with engineering. There's actually, I'm reading this book, Essentialism by Greg McKeown. It's an incredible book. It's a lot about learning how to say no and protect your own time and protect your family's time and your team's time. And but I would say that I think everyone should give it a try if they can, if it's something that they're curious about and their company gives them an opportunity. And I would say that because in the worst case scenario, or even the best case scenario, if you end up returning to an IC, you at least know what you're missing out on, what you're not missing out on. And I guess like one thing that I've never seen folks talk about that I like to talk about is like, at least you know the rules of the game. You know the rules of how the game is played for real. Like, you know how promotions happen. You know, I mean, I've sat through like many hiring decisions, so I know how a hiring decision is made. I've written job descriptions, so I know how a job description is made. I've run my own interview process. I've dealt with good and bad interviewers and interviewees. I've seen how salary negotiation is done. I've seen how like a promotion, what's the cycle, like what's a performance review like from both sides. And if anything, I know how to optimize for those. And I don't see a lot of people talking about that, but like I can go and interview with a company now, and I can kind of have an idea of what the hiring manager is thinking about. I can navigate that process a little bit better. I can even, negotiate my offer a little bit better because I know what goes into play and the finding a good offer or what it feels like to find the right fit for a solution. I know what sunk cost looks like from both sides. So on the more pragmatic side, I think, if anything, you will leave it with these extra skills of like really knowing how things happen under the hood. Yeah,
totally.
That's cool. Speaking of being a individual contributor now, I've heard, rumor has it, that you guys are actually working on you're contributing on a project together. I don't know. It's been talked about, so it's not a secret, but you guys want to tell us a little bit more about it and what you guys are doing?
Yeah. Zeno, tell us a little bit more.
I'm the interviewer here. I'll tell. So basically, we're actually building like a component library and a patterns library. So we feel like there's a gap in the web as a whole, a gap in the technology market, I would say, where lots of people are doing dark mode applications, but they do in a way where they first, like, they have their applications built in light themes and stuff like that. They have their default branding, and then they adapt to dark mode in order to fulfill the gaps, right? People are asking a lot, oh, I want dark mode. So it's kind of like a hype and there's a trend around it, but they do it always like adapting from something else, right? And we decided to like do a reverse engineering on that mentality and build a dark first library. Yeah. So that's what Dracula UI is. Do you agree with that, Netto?
I think that explains it pretty well. It was really instead of going from light to dark mode, we wanted to build something that was dark first and inspired on, like, built on best practices for web design and accessibility, but like really from dark first. And we spent so much time like sweating the details on the developer experience for Dracula UI. We did a survey where we sent it to, I don't know how many thousand people have responded to the survey. Like Zeno would know better. But yeah, and we were asking folks, it's like, hey, when you're building a dark mode website, what are like the tools that you reach out for? What are how do you start? What tools are you comfortable with? What's your favorite tech stack? What sort of tool would you like to build if you had a dark mode library? And have you used Dracula before? And all of those things. And we got an overwhelming number of responses. It took us like an entire week to sort through all the answers and seeing what people were building. So with that in our hands, we're like, hey, there's a need here. Dracula has already like built this great brand and reputation for great products in this for dark mode. So let's give it a try and build something. And Zeno, do you want to tell folks a little bit about like our first few weeks of hacking, how all of that went? A little bit about the experience.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting because even like the idea when we had that thought, like we were hanging out together and then like we almost thought about the idea almost like the same time we're discussing, and that came naturally like, it would be really awesome if you could like build an application from scratch using that. And we started by like, okay, we are 2 developers, right? But we are trying to build a UI component library. So like folks who do that, they are really focused on UI. They know a lot about UX. So those are not our primary skills. But as developers with that developer mindset, we're like, okay, we can just break that into smaller pieces, figure it out. So we actually we bought a Figma course together and we watched like during the week. And we actually took a week off from work, both of us, and we started doing this together. And I
thought that was to hang out with me, but apparently it was to work on Dracula UI.
That was prior. That was prior.
That was the second.
Okay, the second one was.
Was around 2.
And then we just started working on this like component by component, and it's really tough because like building a product, right? You first like try to understand what are the problems. So you do a survey, you get all the data, you start building based on that, and then like there's a challenge of like scope, right? Because you can build like hundreds of components if you want, especially like when you think about patterns. Like, okay, a pricing page. You can build a pricing page with 1 section, 2 sections, 3 sections, and different layouts. So, it's a super challenging project, but we're super excited about that.
Yeah, I think like looking back, like building one component in isolation is really easy. Just building a button is like, it takes you a couple of hours. It's not too bad, but building a cohesive set of patterns and components that work well together and evolve together and compose well together was, to me, the largest problem. Like that, the hardest part was like, it's not building a text field, or it's like, how do I build a form that makes sense? How do I build a login experience that makes sense, like using all of these components together? How do we, it's not just building a text component. It's like, let's look at it like, when you put 3 or 4 paragraphs together, like how do they look like? How do you convey hierarchy, or how do you use colors in a way that doesn't make Dracula UI look like a toy? Because of all the like the very the playful tones and like gradients and colors. Like how do you make Dracula not look like a toy? Like how do you make like apps look like serious like dark mode interfaces and applications? So that was one of the most fun parts, but also one of the most challenging ones.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say like there are a lot of interesting problems in that space, that people don't realize. Like when you're dealing with light applications, it's much easier to like signal contrast and make sure that something is legible. And when you're dealing with dark mode, we learned that in the hard way, where we were building our like pricing page, and then like, okay, we need some depth and hierarchy, and it was super hard to do that, because with light mode, maybe you can do like some depth with box shadows, and now you can bring something like popping up on the screen or lower. And like with dark mode, now you have to play with different gray tones. So there's so many different things, and what do you bring attention to? Because you can put a lot of color in the screen, but then it gets super confusing. You don't know what you should be looking at. So that was a really interesting project for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty big argument, especially with dark mode becoming more common, of what is actually more accessible and easiest to read. Like I feel like I keep switching back and forth. I like dark mode, but then I realize, I think I'm actually I'm faster in terms of reading and writing in light mode. So I'm in that constant struggle. And so I would imagine that when you're building the components, accessibility and readability and all of that becomes really important.
Totally. There's also an aspect of what is the feeling that you want to convey. Like usually dark mode is really used for like those premium high-end sort of experiences. So like a black diamond credit card, or like something that is really fancy and all that. But maybe for like a typical blog, you would be better to just use something light. Also, like it's such a controversial topic. You're going to have people like saying that dark mode is terrible. You're going to have people saying that dark mode is amazing. But at the end of the day, it's up to your taste and what feels better for you, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we are nearing the end, Netto, but we want to end with one question, and that is, what's a tool or like service or software that you are really enjoying, like you're excited to use right now in your day-to-day life?
The first one that comes to mind, and every time that I'm asked this question, it's like, I already knew the answer when you said the first word. It's 1Password. It is the best piece of software I've ever used. I've answered this like so many times. I think 1Password just nailed every single detail of the experience. It's just so good. It's integrated in my phone, in my computer. It works with Touch ID, works with Face ID. And the thing that I love about it is like, it makes doing the right thing easy. And I love tools that do that. It makes my life safer.
You mentioned that earlier.
It makes my life safer and easier. It's like, I don't know any of my passwords. And I know my 1Password. And that's it. I have it like backed up to a few devices in case something goes wrong. Like I have two cell phones. One that I take outside with me. I have another one that I leave as a backup. I have same thing, like 2 MacBooks. One that I have kind of as a backup in case I need it, with like how much traveling I do and all of that stuff. So it's like I know that it's always going to be secure and it's like easy to use, I think. But it just looks beautiful as well. I think that it's affordable. Even if you buy the lifetime license, even more affordable. I've been a user for like almost, 7 or 8 years now, and I'm happy to give them money. Like I have the lifetime and the monthly subscription because I wanted to get my entire family on 1Password. So,
that's awesome.
It's pretty awesome.
My life changed when I convinced my family to use 1Password too. So my wife has it now. My sister has it. And at work, we also use it. So it's so easy. Like, and when I thought they couldn't make something even better, like the UI was already amazing, the desktop app, the browser extension, all that. They built like that watchtower feature where they would like look for passwords and
Compromising,
if something
so, yeah.
was leaked. Yeah. So that was amazing, you know, and that's, I think you nailed when you said that it makes doing the right thing easy, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like if other products try to follow that same path, man, the world will be a better place for sure.
Yeah. I think it's like, so one analogy that I keep repeating and that I realized over time, it's like, you know, and it's the same with using 1Password. It's like riding your bicycle on the bike lane. It's just like everything makes sense and you're safe, and it's so much better than riding in traffic and exposing yourself to all sorts of risk, and or being fined for like not riding in the proper place, or like a car running over you. It's like, yeah, just ride in the bike lane, and it just feels right, and it's more enjoyable and it's safer for you. That's how I feel like when I find great tools. It's they make the hard thing really easy.
What if anyone from 1Password is listening to this? We would love to
Send me
collaborate. We can let's do a sponsorship. Whatever you guys want, we're in. Shameless plug.
Yeah. So Netto, thank you so much, man. Thank you for taking that time. This has been a blast. Like I can speak for myself, but I know from Johnny's smile that this was a great conversation too. And
so
yeah,
much
man, loved it.
Nice. I can't wait to see the next episode.
Awesome. Okay. See you, everybody.